Neil, the command, cracked across the courtyard like a whip. Before the pack, Alpha King Kalen forced the captured Omega to the cold stones, a show of absolute dominance. But as his knee pressed into her shoulder, his own wolf recognized her, his true mate, and in a breathtaking act of rebellion, the beast inside him seized control, dragging the king's body down to kneel beside her in humiliating equality. This was King Kalen, the conqueror of the northern clans, a ruler who had never bowed to anyone. And she was Lyra, a nameless Omega from a rival pack, meant only for public submission. In their world of strict hierarchies, their bond was an impossibility, a genetic mistake that shattered every law of nature and power. So how does a king, betrayed by his own primal soul, rule a pack that just watched his invincibility shatter on the courtyard stones? For 3 centuries, the Winterhold pack had ruled from their mountain fortress, a dynasty built on a simple, brutal law: strength is everything. Their alphas were not chosen, they were forged in combat, killing their predecessors to claim the title. Kalen had done just that 5 years ago, ending the reign of the mad King Vorian. Since then, he had unified 6 fractured territories under the Winterhold banner through a campaign of sheer, terrifying dominance. He was not just a king, he was an institution, and institutions do not kneel. The captured girl, Lyra, represented everything his pack despised. She was from the scattered, nomadic Ashwood Omegas, a people with no territory, no alpha, and no standing. To Winterhold, they were less than rogues, they were ghosts, clinging to ancient traditions in the wild places between real packs. Her capture during a border skirmish was a minor tactical note, a chance to publicly break the spirit of a nuisance faction. The plan was textbook, a display of the Alpha's absolute power, a lesson etched into the stones of the main courtyard for every pack member, from the highest beta to the lowest delta, to witness. But the mate bond doesn't care about tactics. In the paranormal romance genre, it's the nuclear option of destiny, a primal force that bypasses politics, strategy, and even conscious will. According to the foundational tropes of the Omgiverse, this bond is an involuntary biological imperative, often described as a genetic or soul-level recognition that overrides all other loyalties. For Kalen, a man whose entire identity was control, it was the ultimate sabotage. The silence in the courtyard after his wolf forced him down was more deafening than any battle cry. 200 werewolves held their breath, their eyes wide with a terror deeper than fear of punishment. It was the terror of watching gravity fail. Kalen's second-in-command, Beta Soren, was the first to move, his hand going to the weapon at his belt, not toward Lyra, but in a defensive stance, scanning the stunned crowd for the first sign of challenge. The hierarchy, the very architecture of their society, had just cracked. Kalen fought his own body, every muscle corded with strain as he wrestled his wolf back into its psychic cage. The beast wasn't angry, it was ecstatic, pouring a flood of possessive warmth and recognition toward the trembling Omega. Her scent, wild lavender and rain-soaked earth, was now the only thing that mattered in his universe. With a final, shuddering gasp, he wrenched physical control back. He stood, his silver-white hair falling around a face carved from fury and disbelief. He did not look at Lyra. "Take her to the West Tower cell," Kalen commanded, his voice a ragged scrape of its usual authority. "No one touches her, no one speaks to her, is that understood?" The order was a stopgap, a desperate attempt to contain the unexplainable. As 2 stunned guards moved to obey, Lyra lifted her head, her dark hair parted, revealing eyes not of fear, but of a profound, weary shock. In that glance, she wasn't seeing a king. She was seeing the same catastrophic truth he was. The pack scattered, whispers spreading like wildfire through the granite halls of the fortress. In the strategic heart of Winterhold, the war room, the real fallout began. "This is a disaster, Kalen," Soren hissed, the door barely closed. He was the pack's strategist, a man who thought in lines of supply and alliances. The Blacklaw pack spies were in that courtyard. By dawn, every territory will know you were brought low by an Omega scent. Kalen stared at the map of his territories pinned to the wall. "It's not just a scent, Soren, it's the bond." Saying it aloud made it real, and the truth was a physical sickness in his gut. "That's impossible," argued Ilara, the pack's head of security and a rare female gamma in the high command. "Mate bonds are for political unification. They're between alphas and high-ranking betas or allied pack lunars. They don't just happen with prisoners of war. The genetic compatibility alone." Her voice trailed off as she saw the look on Kalen's face. The science of their world, the careful eugenics of strengthening bloodlines, had just been thrown out the window. But here's the thing about biology in the Omegaverse. It is notoriously messy. The trope of the fated mate exists precisely to break the rules, to create a connection so undeniable it topples social order. Researchers of the genre note it's a tool to explore power and consent in unequal dynamics. For Kalen, the bond wasn't a romantic fantasy, it was a hostile takeover of his autonomy. Council pressed him, declare her a witch, execute her publicly to reassert dominance. Mate bonds can be rejected, they argued, citing rare, brutal historical precedents where alphas severed the connection through sheer force of will, though it often drove them mad. Kalen dismissed them all. His wolf, the source of his power, would not allow it. The creature that had won him a kingdom was now a traitor, holding his conscience hostage with waves of protective fury every time he considered harming her. For 3 days, Winterhold operated under a fragile, silent tension. Kalen ruled as he always had, with cold, decisive brutality, but the undercurrent was there. The Challenge Run, a monthly combat ritual where any pack member could challenge for a higher rank, was coming. It was the crucible that kept Winterhold strong, and every alpha in history had used it to crush dissent after a perceived weakness. Meanwhile, in the sparse stone cell of the West Tower, Lyra faced her own ruin. In Ashwood culture, Omegas were the heart of the pack, the nurturers and healers, their submission given willingly to a chosen alpha, not taken by force. Her capture was a disgrace, but the bond, in her tradition, it was a sacred whisper from the moon goddess, never wrong, but never before forced upon a conqueror. She could feel his turmoil through the fledgling connection, a torrent of anger, pride, and a shocking undercurrent of confusion. Her own wolf, a gentle creature she'd always kept hidden, was awake for the first time, pushing her toward the one person she was supposed to hate. On the eve of the Challenge Run, Kalen stood on the high battlements. The bond was a constant ache, a compass needle pulling him toward the West Tower. He had to see her, to prove to himself this was some temporary madness. He found her at her small window, staring at the mountains that had been her home. She didn't turn. "You're going to kill me," she stated softly, not a question. "It would be the rational choice," Kalen replied, his voice echoing in the cold cell. "Your wolf won't let you." Now she turned, and in the moonlight he saw no plea for mercy, only a deep, tragic understanding. "It will tear your mind apart to protect me. I know what your people say about mine, that we're weak, but we understand bonds. You're in a cage of your own making, Alpha King." Her words struck a nerve no weapon could reach. She was right. He was the most powerful werewolf in 5 territories, and he was utterly imprisoned. The next day's Challenge Run would be a bloodbath. Every ambitious warrior would scent his instability. He needed a solution, and he needed it before sunrise. He summoned Soren and Ilara one final time. "The bond is a weakness my enemies will attack," Kalen said, his decision hardening like ice. "Therefore, we will weaponize it. Tomorrow, at the Challenge Run, I will present her not as a prisoner, but as my chosen mate." Ilara's face went pale. "You can't. The law, she's not of rank. The pack will see it as capitulation. It will invite open rebellion." "Exactly," Kalen said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "Let the rebellion come. Let every wolf who doubts my strength step into the ring. I will break them in front of her. I will use the bond's fury to make me stronger, not weaker. We will turn this disaster into a show of force so devastating, no one will ever dare question me again." It was a desperate, monstrous gamble. He would fight not just challengers, but the destabilizing effect of the bond itself, using its intensity to fuel his violence. He would prove that even fate itself was a tool for the Alpha King to wield. The morning of the Challenge Run dawned clear and frigid. The packed earth of the training grounds was circled by the entire pack. The air thrummed with anticipation and bloodlust. Kalen took his throne on the raised dais. Then he gave the order. Lyra was brought out, not in chains, but standing awkwardly beside his seat, draped in a simple grey cloak. The murmurs began instantly, a low, dangerous growl from the assembly. Kalen stood. "Before the challenges begin," his voice boomed, "know this. The Omega Lyra is under the protection of the mate bond. She is mine." He let the declaration hang, a deliberate provocation. The reaction was immediate. A massive warrior, Gunnar, a delta with ambitions and a well-known disdain for Omega sympathies, stepped into the ring. He didn't issue a challenge for rank. He pointed a thick finger at Lyra. "That thing is a flaw in our strength," Gunnar roared. "I challenge the bond itself. If you are truly strong, my king, you will set her aside and face me." This was the moment. This was the rebellion Kaelan had provoked. He descended the steps, removing his ceremonial armor. He met Gunnar's eyes, feeling the bond in his chest scream in protest at the threat to Lyra. He embraced it. He let the possessive rage of his wolf flood his system, his eyes shifting to a blazing, luminous gold. The fight was not a contest. It was an execution. Kaelan moved with a speed and ferocity that shocked even his veteran warriors. He wasn't just defending his title, he was eradicating a blasphemy against his mate. When Gunnar lay broken and yielding on the ground, Kaelan stood over him, his chest heaving, the bond singing a song of savage approval through his veins. He looked from the defeated warrior to his terrified pack. "Any other objections?" he snarled. For a long moment, there was only silence. The strategy had worked. He had channeled the bond into pure, terrifying dominance. Then, from the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. It was Soren, his most trusted friend, his beater. Soren's face was etched with grief, not anger. "My king," Soren said, his voice carrying in the dead quiet, "I do not challenge you, but I must challenge this path. You are letting the bond make you a tyrant, not a king. You won the fight, but you are losing yourself." He then did the unthinkable. He removed the beater pin from his cloak and placed it in the dirt. "I cannot follow you into this madness." It was a blow far worse than any physical challenge. The public resignation of his beater was a repudiation that shook the foundation of Kaelan's authority more than any battle loss. As Soren turned and walked away, the fragile victory of moments ago shattered. Kaelan stood alone in the ring, the bond now feeling not like a weapon, but like a chain, and for the first time, he saw the true cost of his throne. He had just won the fight and lost everything. The beater pin lay in the dirt, a tiny, gleaming symbol of everything Kaelan had just lost. Soren's retreating back was a wound in the fabric of the pack. In the ringing silence, Kaelan did the only thing he could. He turned his golden gaze from the pin to the remaining warriors. "The challenge run is concluded," he announced, his voice stripped of all triumph, leaving only cold steel. "Dismissed." The order was obeyed, but the obedience was different now, tinged with fear, yes, but underneath, a new current of calculation. Back in the war room, now feeling like a tomb, Kaelan faced the crumbling of his kingdom. Ilara delivered the damage report. 3 senior enforcers have requested transfer to border patrols. The Blackclaw Envoy left an hour ago without the usual farewell formalities. They know, she hesitated, and the pack healers report a spike in instability among the lower-rank wolves. They're agitated. The bond's energy is disrupting the normal hierarchy scent markers. The mate bond, a personal catastrophe, was now having a geopolitical and biological effect. In the Omgaverse, the bond isn't just emotional. It's a tangible, often disruptive force that recalibrates the social and sometimes even physical environment of a pack. Kaelan's unprecedented bond with a low-status Omega was emitting psychic and pheromonal static, confusing the established order. His solution to weaponize the bond had backfired spectacularly. He had shown strength, but of a feral, unpredictable kind. To a pack built on predictable, brutal order, a feral king was more dangerous than a weak one. He needed control, and control required understanding. He needed to see Lyra. He found her in a different room, not the tower cell, but a sparse chamber in the living quarters. It was an ambiguous upgrade, not a prisoner's cell, not a consort's suite. She stood by the window again, but turned as he entered. The bond, that constant, maddening pull, surged into a quiet hum in her presence. "Your beater left," she said quietly. "It wasn't a question." "He did. He was right to." Kaelan's jaw tightened. His duty was to stay. "His duty was to his pack," Lyra corrected, her dark eyes holding his. "And you are leading it off a cliff. My people have a saying, the wolf who fights his own shadow starves in the light. You are at war with a part of yourself, and it is consuming everything else." Her words, echoing Soren's warning, hit with the force of a physical blow. The frustration boiled over. "What would you have me do?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. This bond is a weakness. It undermines my authority, terrifies my pack, and has cost me my closest ally. Should I simply embrace it, surrender to this cosmic mistake, and watch Winterhold tear itself apart? For the first time, Lyra showed a flash of anger. You see only how it weakens you asterisk. You forced me to kneel to break my spirit. Your wolf made you kneel to show you your soul. Have you even considered that the mistake isn't the bond, but the world you've built that can't survive it? She took a step closer, the scent of wild lavender cutting through his rage. In my pack, an Omega's strength is harmony. We sense the emotional currents of the pack. We soothe, we balance. What if this bond isn't here to make you weaker, but to make you whole, to give you something besides just the strength to break things? Her theory was heresy in Winterhold. Strength was dominance, control, power over. The concept of strength through connection, through vulnerability, was an Omega fairy tale. Yet as she spoke, his wolf, that traitorous beast, rumbled in profound agreement, sending a wave of calm through his veins. The contradiction was maddening. Before he could respond, Ilara burst in, her face pale. Kaelin, you need to come to the gates, now. At the main gates of the fortress, a delegation had arrived, not from a rival pack, but from the Conclave, the ancient, neutral council of elder werewolves who acted as keepers of law and arbiters of the most sacred laws. They were rarely seen, and their arrival was never good news. 3 elders, 2 men and a woman, their faces lined with ages, stood in simple grey robes that seemed untouched by the mountain wind. The lead elder, a man named Alistair, spoke, his voice like dry leaves. Alpha King Kaelin of Winterhold, the Conclave has heard testimony of a profound anomaly within your pack, a bond of fate between an Alpha of the highest rank and an Omega of no rank, formed under duress and against natural order. This creates a dangerous imbalance. We are here to investigate. Kaelin's blood ran cold. The Conclave's purview was the fundamental laws of their kind, mate bonds, succession, the sacred rites. Their power was moral, not military, but a condemnation from them could legitimize rebellion. Investigate what? Kaelin said, his tone carefully respectful. The bond exists. It is a personal matter. No bond is merely personal, young king, the female elder Moira replied. It is a thread in the tapestry of our kind, a thread so discordant can unravel the weave. We must speak with the Omega. We must ascertain if this is a true fated bond or an abomination. The word hung in the air, abomination asterisk. In their history, bonds that broke too many societal rules were sometimes declared as such unnatural, cursed things that brought ruin. The punishment was always severance, a forced, magical breaking of the bond that could shatter the minds of both parties. Kaelin felt his wolf snarl in his chest, a protective fury so intense it blinded him for a second. The instinct was clear, threat to mate, destroy. He clenched his fists, fighting it down. You will treat her with respect, he growled, the command slipping out. Her treatment, Alistair said, his eyes knowing, will depend entirely on what we find. The Conclave's investigation was a silent, terrifying spectacle. They interviewed pack members, scoured the archives for precedents, and spent hours in closed sessions with Lyra. Kaelin was excluded. The fortress became a pressure cooker. The pack was now split into 3 factions: the loyalists who still feared Kaelin's power, the traditionalists who hoped the Conclave would fix their king, and a growing number of agitated wolves whose instincts were rudderless in the bond's disruptive field. Ilara, now effectively acting beta, worked tirelessly to maintain security. The Blackclaw Alpha has moved warriors to the eastern border, she reported one night. They're not attacking, they're waiting for the Conclave's verdict. Kaelin was trapped. He couldn't move against Blackclaw without looking even more unstable. He couldn't influence the Conclave without disrespecting their authority. His power, once absolute, was now locked in a cage of protocol and prophecy. After 3 days, the Conclave summoned him. They gathered in the great hall, the elders seated at a high table. Lyra stood to one side, looking weary but composed. The entire pack leadership was assembled, the air thick with tension. Elder Alistair stood. We have reached a conclusion, he intoned. The bond between Alpha Kaelin and Omega Lyra is verifiably true, a fated mate connection of uncommon intensity. A faint, hopeful murmur started among some in the room. Kaelan allowed himself a sliver of relief, but Alistair was not finished. However, the elder continued, his voice hardening, its formation and context present an existential crisis. The bond crosses immutable caste boundaries, creating a paradox. An Omega cannot be a lunar of Winterhold by ancient law. Her presence as your fated mate destabilizes the hierarchy your pack, and indeed our entire societal structure is built upon. Therefore, we are faced with two pure outcomes, both ordained by our oldest codes. He held up a bony finger. 1. The Omega is elevated. To do this, Kaelan must relinquish the Winterhold throne. The pack must dissolve, as its foundational principle, alpha supremacy through strength, would be invalidated by an Omega co-ruler. You would both be cast out as rogues. Gasps filled the hall. Dismantle Winterhold. It was unthinkable. Alistair raised a second finger. 2. The bond is severed. Through the rite of sundering, the conclave can forcibly break the connection. This will preserve the pack, its hierarchy, and your throne, Kaelan, but the rite carries a cost. It will permanently scar your wolf spirit. You may lose your dominance. Your aggression may become uncontrollable or fade entirely. And for the Omega, he glanced at Lyra, his gaze almost pitying. The recall from a forced severance from an alpha of your power would likely shatter her mind. She would be an empty shell. The verdict was a masterpiece of brutal catch-22s. Either Kaelan destroyed his pack, or he destroyed himself and Lyra. There was no middle ground. The conclave had not come to help. They had come to enforce the binary cruelty of a system that valued order above all else, even above fate itself. You have 7 days to decide, Elder Moira said. At the full moon, you will announce your choice to your pack and to this conclave. There will be no other path. As the elders filed out, the hall erupted into chaos. Shouts, arguments, pleas. Kaelan stood motionless, staring at the space where the elders had been. The two impossible futures played out in his mind. A life as a rogue with Lyra, hated and hunted, watching his life's work turn to dust. Or a life on a broken throne, his spirit crippled, with Lyra's hollowed-out body as a permanent reminder of the price. His eyes found Lyra across the tumult. She was already looking at him, and in her face, he didn't see fear of either fate. He saw a deep, resolute sadness. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Don't choose, it seemed to say. This is their game, don't play. But the pressure was immediate and immense. The traditionalist faction, led by a cunning gamma named Varus, approached him that evening. My king, Varus said, his tone slick with false sympathy, the choice is clear, the pack must survive. The sundering is a tragedy, but it is the noble sacrifice, for the greater good. Kaelan knew what Varus really wanted. A weakened, possibly broken alpha would be easier to manipulate or eventually to overthrow. The loyalists led by Ilara were despondent. If you choose the sundering, you may not be the king we can follow, she said bluntly. And if you choose her, we cannot follow you into exile. Winterhold is our home. Kaelan spent 2 days in a state of paralytic fury, stalking the battlements, the bond a constant ache that now felt like a death sentence. Lyra, meanwhile, was visited by a young Delta healer named Finn, one of the few pack members who showed her kindness. Finn brought her herbs and, more importantly, information. On the 3rd night, she requested to see Kaelan. He found her in her room, a single candle burning. The healer, Finn, she began without preamble, he has been accessing the deep archives for me, the ones even the conclave might not have fully searched. He found something, a precedent. Kaelan's attention sharpened. What kind of precedent? A third option, Lyra whispered, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight, not in the conclave's laws, but in older ones, from a time before packs were only about strength, from a time when the Omegas had a voice. She took a deep breath. It's called the Trial of the Twin Moons, a challenge that tests not just the strength of the Alpha, but the strength of the bond and the worth of the Omega. If we pass, the bond is recognized as sacred and inviolable, asterisk, and the pack's hierarchy must adapt to accommodate it. It legitimizes us both. Hope, dangerous and fragile, flickered in Kaelan's chest. A trial, what does it entail? That's the problem, Lyra said, her shoulders slumping. The record is fragmented. It mentions a journey to a sacred site, the Cavern of Echoes, deep in the forbidden territory between packs. It mentions facing echoes of your deepest fears, and it says many pairs have attempted it. None are recorded as ever returning. So it wasn't a solution, it was a more glamorous suicide mission. A myth. Kaelin turned away, the hope snuffing out. A fairy tale, it changes nothing. It changes everything, Lyra insisted, grabbing his arm. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. It's a path asterisk outside their rules, don't you see? The Conclave has boxed you in with their binary choice because it's the only way their world makes sense. This trial is from an older world with different rules. It's a way to fight the game itself, not just choose a losing piece. Her words stirred something rebellious in him. He was a king because he broke the old rules, killed the old king. His entire identity was defiance. To submit now to the Conclave's ultimatum felt like a final, ultimate surrender. Even if we wanted to, Kaelin said, the Cavern of Echoes is in no man's land. It would take 3 days, hard travel through contested, dangerous terrain. The Conclave would never allow it. The Pack would see it as desertion. A slow, fierce smile touched Lyra's lips, the first he'd ever seen on her. Then we don't ask for permission, she said. We don't tell the Pack. We go tonight. It was madness. It was treason against the Conclave's decree. It was abandoning his Pack in its moment of crisis. But as he looked at her, at the defiant fire in her eyes that mirrored the one now igniting in his own wolf, the two horrible choices the Conclave gave him evaporated. This was a third path, a desperate, probably fatal one, but it was their asterisk path. What about the Pack? He asked, the king in him making a final stand. If we succeed, we save it from a worse fate, Lyra replied. If we fail, they were doomed anyway by your other choices. The logic was brutal but sound. Kaelin made his decision. He summoned Elara, trusting her with the truth. Hold the fortress for 7 days, he commanded. Tell the Conclave I am in seclusion, considering my choice. If we are not back by the full moon, assume we are dead and follow your conscience. Elara looked between them, a storm of conflict on her face. Finally, she nodded. Go, and for the moon's sake, come back. Under the cover of a moonless night, Kaelin and Lyra slipped through a hidden postern gate, two shadows fleeing a gilded cage. They had no army, no guarantee, only a cryptic legend, a bond that was both their burden and their compass, and the terrifying, exhilarating freedom of having stolen their fate back from the hands of gods and elders. They were now fugitives from the very world Kaelin had built, racing against time toward a myth that had consumed everyone who had ever sought it. The real trial had just begun. The wilderness between territories was a lawless place, a haven for rogues, outcasts, and things that had forgotten the shape of a man. Kaelin, who had spent his life in fortresses or leading armies, was now navigating by stars and instinct, the bond a taut, gidding wire pulling him northeast. Lyra moved beside him with a silent, innate grace, reading the forest in ways he never could. For the first day, they didn't speak. The enormity of their desertion was a third presence between them. But the silence couldn't last. The bond demanded connection. As they made a sparse camp in a shallow cave on the first night, Kaelin finally broke. Why did you agree to this? The trial is likely a death sentence. You could have let the Conclave sever the bond. You might have survived, broken, but alive. Lyra fed a twig into their small fire. You assume survival is the only goal, she said softly. My people believe a life without purpose is no life at all. If the bond is real, and it is, then it has a purpose. Dying to discover that purpose is better than living having denied it. She looked at him, the firelight dancing in her eyes. And what about you, King of Winterhold, reduced to a fugitive? Why follow a myth? Kaelin stared into the flames, because every other path was a cage. A throne is just a prettier prison if you cannot rule yourself. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. The admission hung in the air, and the bond hummed, not with triumph, but with a simple, profound acknowledgement. The second day brought the first real danger. A band of 4 rogues, scrawny but desperate, scented them. They weren't interested in politics, they were interested in meat. Kaelin shifted instantly, a massive storm-grey wolf placing himself between the threat and Lyra. But before he could lunge, Lyra did something astonishing. She didn't cower. She stepped forward, her hands open at her sides, and let out a low, resonant hum. It wasn't a growl. It was a sound of pure, resonant calm. The effect was immediate. The lead rogue, a mangy brown wolf, skidded to a halt, his aggressive snarl dying in his throat. He whined, confused. The others milled about, their aggression dissipating like smoke. Lyra held the note, her eyes closed, until one by one, the rogues turned and melted back into the trees. Kaelin shifted back, staring at her. What was that? An Omega's true strength, Lyra said, her breath slightly ragged. Not to dominate, but to pacify, to harmonize discord. Your wolf is a weapon, mine is a balm. For Kaelin, it was a revelation. He had seen strength only as the ability to inflict force. Here was strength as the ability to defuse it. It didn't make him respect her, that was already a lost battle, but it fundamentally altered his understanding of the power dynamics the Conclave deemed immutable. On the evening of the third day, they found the Cavern of Echoes. It wasn't hidden. It was a vast, dark moor in the side of a sheer cliff, radiating an ancient, watchful energy that made the hair on their arms stand up. The air itself felt stilled, waiting. As they crossed the threshold, torches of pale blue flame flickered to life along the walls without any visible cause, illuminating a tunnel that sloped deep into the earth. The voice came not from a person, but from the cavern itself, a resonant whisper that seemed to come from the stone and the air simultaneously. Kaelin of Winterhold, Lyra of Ashwood, you seek the trial of the twin moons. To pass, you must face three echoes: the echo of the past, the echo of the self, the echo of the bond. Fail any, and your souls will join the whispers in this stone. Proceed. The first chamber was the echo of the past. The moment they entered, the world dissolved. Kaelin found himself back in the fortress courtyard, but he was not the king. He was a boy of 10, watching his father, the then Alpha, execute his mother for treason. The memory was a wound that had never healed, the source of his belief that love was vulnerability and vulnerability was death. He felt the old horror, the powerlessness. But this time, Lyra was there beside him, a ghost in his memory. You built a wall of strength around this pain, her voice echoed in his mind. But the wall also locked the pain inside. She didn't speak platitudes. She simply stood with him, her presence in the bond, a steady, warm pressure against the cold agony of the memory. The echo wasn't asking him to forget. It was asking him to stop letting the memory be the foundation of his every decision. To his shock, he found he could look at his father's furious face, and instead of feeling only rage, he felt a pang of pity for the man so terrified of weakness he murdered his own heart. The memory faded, not erased, but integrated. Lyra's echo was different. She was a child again during the raid that scattered the Ashwood Omegas. She was hiding, watching Winterhold warriors, Kaelin's predecessors, cut down her elders. The shame of her survival, the helplessness, the reason she believed she was unworthy of any alpha, let alone a king. Kaelin saw it through her eyes, felt her terror as his own. His wolf surged with a protective fury that was centuries too late. You carry their deaths as your failure, he thought to her, the bond allowing the communication. But your survival isn't a shame, it's a promise, to remember, to be different. He offered not comfort, but a shared rage redirected. Her echo, too, dissolved. They emerged from the chamber trembling, but lighter. The bond between them was no longer just a biological tether. It was a bridge across which they had carried each other's heaviest ghosts. The second chamber was the echo of the self. This one was brutal, it separated them. Kaelin found himself in an endless hall of mirrors, but each reflection showed a different version of himself. The conqueror, drenched in blood. The tyrant, feared and alone. The broken king after the sundering, eyes empty. And one small and almost hidden, the boy who loved his mother. The echoes taunted him. Which is your true self? Choose or be torn apart. He understood the trap. To choose the conqueror was to reject Lyra's influence. To choose the boy was to reject his throne. The trial demanded not a choice, but an acceptance. I am all of them, he growled at the mirrors. The boy, the conqueror, the tyrant, the king. The bond doesn't erase what I am. It asks what I will become with it. The mirrors shattered, not into pieces, but into a fine, silvery mist. Lyra's challenge was auditory. A chorus of voices, her lost pack, the Winterhold warriors, the Conclave elders, all telling her who she was: worthless, prisoner, abomination, bargaining chip. The voices grew into a deafening cacophony. Her test was to find her own voice beneath the definitions imposed by others. She didn't shout. She sank to her knees and began to hum again, that same pacifying melody, but this time she turned it inward. She hummed until the external voices faded, and all that was left was the quiet, steady truth in her own heart. I am Lyra, I am an Omega, I am his mate. The the chorus ceased. They reunited in the central cavern, fundamentally altered. The personas they presented to the world had been stripped away. What was left was raw, real, and terrifyingly intertwined. The third chamber, the echo of the bond, was a simple, dark space. The cavern's voice returned. The final echo, you have faced your past and yourselves, now face your future. The bond will be made manifest, endure its truth. A searing, golden light erupted from the center of the chamber, splitting into two beams that struck each of them in the chest. Suddenly, they weren't just feeling each other's emotions, they were asterisk inside each other's minds. Kaelin was flooded with Lyra's profound empathy, her deep connection to the living world, her quiet, unshakable courage that had nothing to do with physical strength. He felt the sheer, staggering weight of her compassion, and it overwhelmed him more than any battle. Lyra, in turn, was swamped by the tempest of Kaelin's psyche. The constant, grinding pressure of leadership, the isolation, the calculus of violence that underpinned every decision, the fierce, buried loyalty to his pack that was his only true vulnerability. She felt the raw, unrefined power of him and the immense loneliness it created. But they also felt the distortions. Kaelin felt how Lyra's kindness could curdle into martyrdom, a willingness to vanish for the peace of others. Lyra felt how Kaelin's strength could rigidify into tyranny, a refusal to bend that would inevitably break. The bond wasn't showing them a perfect union, it was showing them a complete one, flaws and all, with terrifying clarity. The intensity was agony. It felt like their souls were being flayed open and knitted together simultaneously. The cavern's voice boomed. The bond is a conduit. It will amplify what you bring to it. Amplify her compassion and you will heal kingdoms. Amplify his strength and you will protect them. Amplify her martyrdom and you will both fade into nothing. Amplify his tyranny and you will burn the world. The choice of what your bond becomes is yours, every day. Now bear its mark. The light coalesced, burning a symbol onto the inside of each of their right wrists. For Kaelin, a crescent moon cradling a wolf's head. For Lyra, a wolf's head crowned by a crescent moon, two halves of the same whole. The pain receded, leaving them breathless on the cold stone floor, forever changed. They had passed, the trial was over. As they stumbled out of the cavern entrance, dawn was breaking. They were different people. The bond was now a conscious, living thing between them, a tool they understood how to wield, for good or ill. But the real world hadn't paused for their transformation. As they reached the tree line, a familiar figure stepped out. It was Soren. He wasn't alone. He had a small contingent of loyalists with him, including the healer, Finn. They looked weary, but their eyes lit up with hope at the sight of the markings on their wrists. "Thank the moon," Soren breathed. Then his expression hardened. "You need to move, now. The Conclave discovered you were gone 2 days ago. They declared you oathbreakers and enacted a forfeiture. They've installed a regent to rule Winterhold." "Who?" Kaelin demanded, the king snapping back into place, but now tempered by the new wisdom in his eyes. "Gamma Varys," Soren spat. "He's opened negotiations with Blackclaw. He's going to hand over the Eastern Territories for their support, and he's issued a bounty on both of you, not for capture, for execution. The Conclave has sanctioned it." The victory of the trial turned to ash in their mouths. They had transcended their personal demons only to return to a political nightmare far worse than the one they'd left. Varys was dismantling Kaelin's kingdom. The Conclave had moved from arbiters to active conspirators. But then Finn stepped forward, his voice urgent. "There's more, my king. While you were gone, I kept searching the archives. I found the rest of the fragmented scroll. The trial of the twin moons, it wasn't just for legitimizing bonds." He looked between Kaelin and Lyra, his eyes wide. It was the ancient right to legitimize a new kind of rule, a rule of two, a diamond throne. It doesn't just validate your bond, it validates asterisk her as a co-ruler. By the oldest laws, older than the Conclave itself, your successful completion means you don't just return to your throne, you return to claim a new one, and any who stand against you are standing against the oldest magic our kind knows. The revelation was a seismic shift. This wasn't about going back to save Winterhold. This was about going back to reclaim it and to transform it. The markings on their wrists weren't just mating marks, they were coronation scars. Kaelin looked at Lyra, and in her eyes he saw the same fierce, terrifying understanding. The journey into the cavern was over. The war for their future was about to begin. They weren't fugitives anymore. They were revolutionaries with the weight of ancient prophecy on their side, and a pack to win back from the jaws of betrayal. The Diamond Throne, the words hung in the mountain air, a forgotten legend made flesh in the marks on their skin. Kaelin looked from Soren to Lyra, the strategic part of his mind, the king, already calculating. They had an ancient right on their side, but Varys had the fortress, the Conclave's sanction, and a deal with Blackclaw. This wouldn't be won by legend alone. It would be won by a better plan. How many are still loyal? Kaelin asked Soren. More than Varys knows, Soren replied, a grim smile on his face. Ilara holds the inner guard. They're waiting for a signal, but Varys has the main gate and the barracks, and the Conclave elders are still in the Great Hall, giving his rule a veneer of legitimacy. Lyra spoke, her voice clear. We don't attack the gates, we walk through them. Kaelin raised an eyebrow. He has a shoot-on-sight order. He has an order for a fugitive Alpha and a rogue Omega, Lyra corrected, holding up her marked wrist. He does not have an order for the bearers of the twin moons. The scroll said these marks are recognized by the oldest magic. We don't sneak in, we announce ourselves. At the main gate, in front of the whole pack, let the magic and the truth do the work. It was a gamble of staggering audacity to walk openly into the jaws of the trap, but Kaelin saw the logic. A covert attack would be just that, an attack, validating Varys's narrative of a traitorous king. A public, defiant return would be a challenge to the story itself. They would fight the narrative first, the army second. They moved quickly. Soren's group spread out, making contact with the underground loyalist network inside the fortress. The message was simple: the true king returns at noon, be ready. No specifics, just a spark of hope. As the sun reached its zenith, Kaelin and Lyra stood at the edge of the tree line, looking up at the towering gates of Winterhold. They had cleaned up as best they could, but they looked like what they were, survivors of the wild, marked by something ancient. They walked, side by side, into the open field before the main gate. Sentinels on the walls spotted them immediately. Alarms sounded. Within minutes, the walls were lined with warriors, arrows nocked. The massive gates groaned open, and Gamma Varys strode out, flanked by his personal guard, and pointedly, two of the Conclave elders, Alistair and Moira. Varys looked smug, clad in borrowed ceremonial armor that didn't quite fit. Kaelin, Varys boomed, his voice carrying, you return to face justice, and you bring the little Omega with you. How convenient. Lay down your weapons and submit to the Conclave's judgment. Kaelin stopped 100 paces from the gate, Lyra beside him. He didn't shout. He spoke, his voice projected with the natural dominance of an alpha, reaching every wolf on the walls. I do not return to submit, Varys. I return to reclaim what was stolen, and I do not stand alone. He took Lyra's hand and raised both their arms, pulling back their sleeves to reveal the glowing, silvery marks of the crescent moon and wolf. A collective gasp rippled through the pack on the walls. The marks pulsed with a soft, undeniable light. Elder Alistair stepped forward, his face a mask of shock. That is impossible. Those are the marks of the trial of the twin moons, a rite lost for 500 years. Not lost, Lyra said, her voice carrying a new, resonant authority. Simply waiting, we have faced the echoes and returned. Our bond is not an abomination. It is the foundation of the Diamond Throne. By the oldest laws you are sworn to uphold, our rule is legitimized. Varys's smugness cracked into panic. Sorcery, they brand themselves with tricks. Guards seize them, but the guards hesitated, staring at the pulsating marks. The oldest magic held a deep, instinctual sway. Elder Moira's eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a dawning, terrible understanding. The trial, if completed, supersedes all contemporary judgments. The Conclave's forfeiture, it would be void. She was talking to herself, realizing the legal trap they had sprung. The Conclave's authority is derived from the old laws, Kaelin declared, now addressing the pack directly. You elders came to enforce a binary choice that would preserve your idea of order, but the oldest law of all offers a third path, not Alpha alone, not Omega alone, but the two, bonded, ruling as one, the Diamond Throne. Do you uphold the old laws, or do you admit your authority is a sham? It was a masterstroke. He had turned the Conclave's own power source against them. In front of the entire pack, they had to either acknowledge the legitimacy of the Marks and nullify their support for Varys, or expose themselves as hypocrites, destroying their credibility forever. Alistair and Moira exchanged a long, fraught look. The silence stretched. Finally, Moira bowed her head, a gesture of immense significance. The Marks are true. The trial is validated. The Conclave recognizes the legitimacy of the bonded rule. Varys's face purpled with rage. You treacherous old fools, the deal with Blackclaw is made. They are coming. We need a strong, singular alpha, not this freakish pair. In his fury, he revealed the truth he'd tried to hide. His rule was already a puppet regime, selling out Winterhold's territory for external support. The word Blackclaw was the final catalyst. Murmurs of betrayal erupted on the walls. This was no longer about a strange bond. It was about a traitor giving away their land. You heard him, Kaelin roared, his voice the clarion call of the warrior king they remembered. Your regent has bartered your homes to our oldest enemy. He speaks of strength, but he is a thief and a pawn. I stand before you, bonded to an Omega whose strength saved us from rogues without violence, whose wisdom guided us through the trial. Our strength together is what will save Winterhold. Who will you follow? The traitor who sells your future, or your king and his queen, who have walked through fire to claim it? It was the moment of choice. The loyalists, primed by Elara and Soren, raised their voices first. For the Diamond Throne, for Kaelin and Lyra. The cry was taken up by others, then more, a swelling wave of sound that crashed against the walls. Varys's guards looked at each other, then slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons and stepped away from him, leaving him isolated before the gates. Varys, seeing his power evaporate, snapped. With a roar, he shifted into a brutish, tawny wolf and charged directly at Lyra, the source of all his ruin. Kaelin moved to intercept, but Lyra was faster. She didn't shift. She stood her ground, and as Varys leaped, she unleashed the full force of her Omega power, not a pacifying hum this time, but a focused, concussive wave of pure calm asterisk. It hit Varys midair like a physical wall. His aggressive shift stuttered, reversed. He crashed to the ground at her feet, not as a wolf, but as a disoriented, helpless man. She had not fought him with claws, but with the very essence of her nature, and she had utterly defeated him. The demonstration was more powerful than any kill. The pack saw it, the strength of an Omega, not as submissive, but as sovereign. Kaelin walked over, placing a boot on Varys's chest. Your reign is over. He looked to Elara. Take him to the Black Cells. We will deal with him after we deal with his allies. With Varys deposed, the reclamation was swift. The Conclave elders, their authority severely diminished, were escorted from the territory with a firm warning to revise their interpretations of the old laws. The pack's morale, which had been fracturing, coalesced around the drama and victory of the return, but the greater threat remained. Kaelin and Lyra went straight to the war room. Soren presented the tactical situation. Blackclaw's vanguard is a half-day's march from the eastern border. They're expecting Varys to open the gates. They don't know he's fallen. Lyra studied the map. They're coming because they were promised an easy victory over a divided pack, she said, so we must show them a united one, and we must show them something they don't understand. Her plan was brilliant, leveraging both their strengths. Kaelin would lead the main Winterhold force to the border in a classic, intimidating show of strength, but Lyra, with Soren and a small team of scouts, would slip into the forest ahead of them. Using her connection to the land and her empathic abilities, she would locate the Blackclaw scouts and advance parties, and instead of killing them, she would do what she did best, pacify them. She would project waves of confusion, homesickness, and doubt, disrupting their communications and sowing discord in their ranks before a single claw was raised. The battle, when it came, was unlike any Winterhold had fought. Kaelin's forces met the Blackclaw vanguard on a rocky plain. The Blackclaw warriors, already uneasy from encountering confused, dispirited scouts, faced a Winterhold army that fought with a strange, disciplined fury. And on a high ridge overlooking the field, Lyra stood, a lone figure, her song weaving through the minds of the enemy, amplifying their fear, their longing for home, their sense of wrongness. It wasn't mind control. It was empathy turned into a weapon, turning their own emotions against them. The Blackclaw line broke. They retreated in disorder, not from overwhelming casualties, but from overwhelming psychological dissonance. Winterhold held the field without a major loss of life. In the aftermath, Cailan stood beside Lyra on the ridge, looking down at the retreating enemy. "You won this battle without drawing a blade," he said, awe in his voice. "We won it," she corrected, leaning into him. "Your strength held the line. My harmony broke their will. One without the other would have failed." They returned to Winterhold not just as victors, but as the architects of a new kind of victory. The Pack's view of Lyra transformed from suspicious Omega to revered queen, the other half of their king's power. The following week, they held a new kind of ceremony in the Great Hall, not a coronation, but a unification. Before the assembled Pack, Cailan and Lyra formally took their seats on the raised dais, not one throne, but two, intricately carved chairs of dark wood and silver placed side by side. The diamond throne, a rule of two. Cailan spoke the new laws. The rigid caste system was not abolished overnight. Such a thing would cause chaos, but it was reformed. Omegas could choose paths of service beyond submissive roles. Their empathic and healing gifts were formally recognized as vital Pack strengths. Promotion would be based on merit and contribution, not just brute force. And the mate bond, in all its forms, was placed under the protection of the throne, free from political interference. The final surprising detail came from the deep archives, uncovered fully by Finn in the days that followed. The fragmented scroll about the Diamond Throne had one last clause. It stated that the first Omega to co-rule under this right would bear the title Moon-Crowned, and her lineage would carry a latent, stabilizing power that could calm territorial conflicts for generations. Lyra, the captured orphan from a destroyed people, wasn't just a queen. She was the potential founder of a new bloodline, a living peace treaty. Her very existence promised an end to the endless cycle of conquest that had defined their history. Months later, Winterhold was changing. The atmosphere was still disciplined, but the fear was gone, replaced by a cautious, growing pride. Soren had returned as Beta, his faith restored. Ilara commanded the guards with fierce loyalty, and in their private chambers, Cailan and Lyra finally had a moment of quiet. He held her, looking out at their mountains. "I forced you to kneel to break you," he murmured, the memory of the courtyard a distant, painful dream. "And your wolf made you kneel to remake you," she replied, smiling. "Now we both stand." The journey from a humiliating kneel in the torchlight to ruling side by side on the Diamond Throne was complete. They had faced the echo of their pasts, the truth of their selves, and the fire of their bond. They had shattered an unjust law and forged a new one. The Alpha King and the Omega Queen had not just found each other, they had found a way to change their world. And their reign, built on the balance of strength and harmony, was just beginning. So what does the story of the Kneeling King and his Omega Queen truly represent? On one level, it's the ultimate power reversal fantasy, a cathartic engine that drives countless paranormal romance narratives. The mighty are humbled, the overlooked are elevated, and fate delivers poetic justice on a silver platter. But Cailan and Lyra's journey taps into something deeper within the Omegaverse genre. It's not just about reversing a hierarchy, it's about questioning the hierarchy's very foundation. The rigid Alpha, Beta, Omega system, much like the flawed real-world wolf science it was loosely based on, is a social construct, and like all constructs, it can be broken and remade. Their triumph wasn't that Cailan became weak or Lyra became a traditional alpha. It was that they created a third option. They proved that strength and empathy, dominance and harmony are not opposites to be chosen between, but forces to be integrated. The Diamond Throne is a metaphor for balance. In a genre often critiqued for romanticizing possessive, all-or-nothing dynamics, their story proposes a more nuanced vision of the fated mate trope, one where the bond is a beginning, not an end, and its true test is what you build together. The public kneel in the courtyard was the spark. It was the moment the old world, built on uncompromising dominance, cracked. Every step that followed, the conclave's ultimatum, the trial in the cavern, the defiant return, was about two people choosing to write a new set of rules. They didn't just find love, they performed a revolution. And that's the lingering question their story leaves us with. How many of our own real-world systems feel just as immutable? How many binaries do we face that insist we must choose one path and abandon another? Strength or compassion? Power or partnership? Tradition or progress? Kalen and Lyra challenge us to look for the third path, the trial of the twin moons waiting in our own lives. The path that demands we face our echoes, integrate our contradictions, and dare to build something new, even when every established authority says it's impossible. From a kneeling of humiliation to a standing of equals, their saga shows that the most profound power isn't the power to force someone down. It's the power to lift something new together from the ground up. If you were captivated by this deep dive into the mechanics of power, fate, and romance in the Omgaverse, do us a huge favor. Smash that like button. It lets us know you want more content like this. Share this documentary with your pack, your book club, or anyone who loves a story where the underdog doesn't just win, but changes the game. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next exploration into the thrilling, heart-pounding worlds of fiction and folklore. Let us know in the comments below, what was the most satisfying moment of transformation for you? Was it Kalen's first moment of understanding in the echo chamber, Lyra's pacification of Varys, or the final establishment of the Diamond Throne? We read every single one. Until next time, keep questioning the rules and keep imagining new worlds.